I'm not so sure you're right about this, Jules, who is already suggesting that every pause in these terrible, catastrophic interviews. Do you see what I did there? Catastrophic. No? Oh, I don't know why I bother. I was up all night working on that. Is designed to string out the time because each interview was so short. The longer she paused, the fewer questions she would need to answer. I disagree on this occasion, Jules. I think that some of them do that, but you could almost hear the cogs whirring at a snail's pace as she desperately sought to come up with something to say in response to some rather splendid questions from a selection of local radio presenters on the BBC. Part of the reason, if you're wondering, why would she do that and not do national stuff? Cowardice, I guess, although a huge miscalculation from her comms department, where, I kid you not, someone who, until quite recently, worked for Prince Andrew is currently quite high on the ladder of seniority. They don't have to worry about access. These people, they get to speak to the Prime Minister about once every electoral cycle, maybe during when there's an election on the horizon, and it's all set up in advance, and there's no chance whatsoever of a presenter on BBC Bristol or on BBC Kent having access pulled. Oh no, we won't talk to them next time, because it's done so swiftly, and for such a short period of time that they don't have to do what many presenters and journalists at a national level have to do, which is, sadly, and I mean no criticism by this, because I fully appreciate that not everybody can put together a daily current affairs programme without ever talking to a member of the government, but they have to prostrate themselves a bit. They have to pull their punches. Not completely, not always consciously. Sometimes it's subconscious. But, that is why sometimes the local radio journalists who don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to be, invited to actually present a Conservative leadership hustings, for example. They don't have to worry about keeping these people sweet, so they can actually hit them with questions that might land a little harder than we are currently used to. 6 minutes after 10 is the time. We'll have a little listen to some of them at the moment, but let's begin with a quick roundup. If only you'd taken that job at Radio Norfolk, says Paul. Yeah, I know. Every day I wake up wondering. It's a sliding doors moment for me on that. 6 minutes after 10 is the time. I mean, here's the mad thing, right, about this morning. It's madness upon madness upon madness. But the mad thing about this morning is that unless I misconstrued everything I've heard so far, then you're looking at Liz Truss speaking publicly, making an appalling situation worse. Because as she was actually speaking, the UK's 10-year gilt rose by about 21 basis points to 4.22%, which means she has undone, and I know why this has happened, by refusing to admit a mistake and by continuing to claim that everything is going according to plan and this was actually the right thing to do. There's a huge flaw in that claim, by the way, which we'll get to in a second. But by refusing to admit any form of mistake and continuing to claim that everything that they've done was the right thing to do, she spooks the markets further. So this is where things get truly surreal, and that's an overused word, but it fits today because the distance from rational reality and this government now is so enormous that you could drive the Titanic through it. And the Titanic, of course, remains a very relevant analogy, because what the Bank of England did yesterday was essentially slam on the emergency brakes on the government. The announcement by Kwasi Kwarteng last week had done such damage to the markets, if you like, or rather to our economic standing, that the Bank of England had to use a ton of money to buy up stuff that if they hadn't bought it could have seen a run upon your pension fund of the kind seen with the Northern Rock not that long ago. So that's what happened yesterday. It's a very simple relationship. Whatever your politics, whatever your religion, whatever football team you support, the markets, the money markets, which determine, most importantly, how much it costs to borrow money, for example. That is the single most important element of this, especially for a government that has just announced billions and billions and billions and billions of pounds of uncosted borrowing. The amount you will have to pay to borrow money is one of the main things affected by the quotes markets, end quotes, okay? They have run for the hills after Kwasi Kwarteng's budget announcement. So damaging is that to the overall economic picture of the nation that the Bank of England, which thank God is independent, has to gallop in and put the brakes on our own government. So the National Bank, if you like, putting the brakes on the national government. And then today the Prime Minister came out and, she did. She essentially doubled down on the policy that has both spooked the markets and compelled the central bank to directly seek to undo some of the damage done by a government policy. So the bank is seeking to undo damage done by a policy introduced by Liz Truss, which she this morning is not only defending, but claiming was the correct course of action to follow. And that, in all the years I have been doing this job, is possibly the hardest thing I have ever tried to understand, or the most difficulty I have ever had in understanding why they are doing something. Until you think of that big boat that we mentioned a moment ago. And they can't let go of the life raft. The life raft at the moment is the claim. It's a very Brexity claim. The life raft is the claim that however bad everything is going, it's definitely the right thing to be doing. Cling, 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 fingertips. Let go of it, what happens? You're out, you're finished, you're toast. And now this attempt in some corners of the media to separate Kwarteng from Truss. Man alive, that's pathetic. You remember the three-legged race on Sports Day at school? Do you remember that, when they used to bind our ankles together? And I don't know if they're allowed to do it anymore. It's probably so many fractured ankles and broken out. I'm sure they are. That's Truss and Kwarteng. They're bound at the ankle. Absolutely no way that he went out on Friday and announced things that she wasn't four square behind. Just doesn't happen like that. It simply doesn't. So that's where we are now. And this morning, as she spoke, even if you, like me, struggle to understand some of the technical stuff, let me put it in the simplest of language. As Liz Truss was speaking, some of the damage undone by the Bank of England yesterday was redone. And here's another thing I noticed. Oh, quickly, the reason why the defence that this is absolutely fine and all going according to plan is so dishonest and destructive and ridiculous is very, very simply because they would have told us. If they'd known that this was going to happen, they'd have told us this was going to happen. The sort of phalanx of complete flumps who have been praising this. Only one or two of them are left. There's a bloke in the Telegraph called Alistair Heath still claiming he was claiming it's the best budget he'd ever seen last week. Front page of the Daily Telegraph, finally a proper Conservative budget. Do you know where the economy is today in the Daily Mail? Front page of the Daily Mail, had that headline. Less than a week later, they don't even talk about it until page 8. They've got a story on their front page, the Daily Mail, which told you Liz Truss was the answer to the nation's problems, and that budget announced last week was delivered direct from the heavens. They've got a story about one of Stephen Lawrence's murderers being found with a phone up his fundament. That's the front page story of the Conservative Party's House Journal today, the Daily Mail, while the country burns. That's what they're doing. Look over there, page 8, before they even get round to it. And of course, if there was even a scintilla of truth, if there was a morsel of plausibility in the claim that this is actually the correct thing to do and everything is going according to plan, they'd have told us, they'd have warned us, they would have comforted the markets about what the master plan was. But they're not. They are headless chickens running around claiming to be in complete control of the situation. And I have finally realised why I fell in love with a phrase a year or so ago and turned it into one of my regular catchphrases on the programme. That's not an opinion, that's counting. Because you can gaslight voters, you can gaslight media, you can sign up secretly funded lobby groups masquerading as think tanks to infiltrate every corner of the British media, selling your vampiric neoliberal agenda. That's all opinion. Opinion, opinion, opinion. You can't gaslight numbers. You can't sway the markets with propaganda. These are the super brains. These are the blokes sitting there crunching numbers and reading the runes and looking at what's going to happen on the horizon and betting the house on it. They take a lot more care with their decisions than Kwasi Kwarteng or Liz Truss do. Kwasi Kwarteng dispensing with the most senior civil servant in the Treasury, a universally respected individual called Tom Scholar, and simultaneously telling the Independent Office for Budgetary Responsibility not to bother getting out of bed in the morning when they were ready and willing to provide proper economic costings and forecasts of everything that he announced on Friday. It is literally closing your eyes and sticking your fingers in your ears. And I mean literally, it's not metaphorical. At some point, he must have actually closed his eyes and stuck his fingers in his ears. Everybody needs... I didn't nearly use a rude word there. I should stop saying that. I'm far too professional ever to use a rude word on the radio, but I'd like to sometimes. Everybody needs a WASIC alarm, right? Everybody needs a WASIC alarm. Everybody needs someone who will whisper in their ear on occasion, mate, you're being a WASIC. I'm very lucky. I've told you before. I'll tell you again. I made the very brilliant decision of marrying a WASIC alarm. A few things more important to a happy marriage than having a WASIC alarm on the other side of the dining table. Whoa, wind your neck out. And he got rid of his WASIC alarm. Not only did he get rid of his WASIC alarm, he also got rid of his spreadsheet. And he just walked into the House of Commons and announced stuff without justifying it, explaining it, accounting for it, or generating any faith whatsoever in it, outside, of course, the offices of the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph. And that's why we are where we are. There it is, in a nutshell.